Hello fellow apes, I'm back and I have for you guys a video. Um, it's been a while since I made a video, and it's been a very long while since I've tripped, but over the course of the past 4 or 5 weeks I've had a few mushroom trips, two of which were notable. The first notable trip was a 2-gram mushroom trip, and the second one was 4 grams. This video is the story of the second one. So yeah, I'm just gonna read it, but please comment. If anybody has anything to say about any of this, comment. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to talk to all you guys, and thank you all. Oh yeah, and also read the description. But yeah, this is a long video already, so, or it's gonna be a long video for sure, so I'll just read it. To make a very long story short, I picked up more mushrooms and reunited with a group of immeasurable beings. I had some time after my last 2-gram mushroom trip to put myself back together and to begin to integrate the lesson of appreciating life and not constantly trying to dissect it and make sense of it. During this time period, I felt so very connected, and life was presenting me with lessons and synchronistic anomalies on the daily. I'll attribute this to a realization that focus should be directed exclusively into the present moment. This grants one a very heightened awareness of his environment, and thus he recognizes things like this. After these weeks of integration and lessons and becoming acquainted with the cosmic laugh again after a while, I simply wanted to trip again. And with this new mindset, I knew I was in a place to experience a very deep internal journey. This time, myself and another friend, we'll call him D, picked up more shrooms than I've ever seen in one place. After picking them up and splitting them up between a few friends, I went home with 4.5 grams of Tasmanian cubensis. This strain gave an extremely deep trip on 2 grams, so I knew now that I had the potential to go to the deepest levels I could bear. That night, I ate 4 grams. I knew that this would be more than enough to deliver me even deeper than I had gone before, and with the intention to meditate in silent darkness and allow myself to completely drift off, I tripped. The come-up was familiar, and once it began, maybe 30 minutes post-ingestion, it was very, very fast. The walls in my room went from shallowly drifting around to melting and breathing and existing in multiple places at once. Everything glistened and shone with greens and blue sparkles. Reality became extremely high definition. Details became subject, and the background of life became so loud that nothing was separate from anything else. Having had a bit of experience with LSD and now with mushrooms, I can say that the psilocybin come-up is a quantum leap compared to the steady ascent of acid. Anyway, as soon as I started to come up, I shut off all the lights and laid down with no music. This silent darkness would be my setting for the whole trip. This trip felt like a continuation of the last one, like I unpaused the journey. And this is not a new feeling I get while taking psychedelics consecutively over a relatively short period of time. One thing I did do though, and I'm glad I did, was record audio of the trip. I'm very glad I did this because on this trip, I came in contact with the same beings I did at the center of my first ever real mushroom trip. These beings are sometimes called the Machine Elves. Terence McKenna sometimes referred to them as tykes, or the jeweled self-dribbling basketballs. Whatever words you want to call them, they are unimaginable. And this is the second time I have come into undeniable contact with these entities. I managed to capture my reaction to the very moment I began slipping into their realm. After closing my eyes, I was instantly greeted by this series of entrances, wormholes, hallways, mandalic doorways, and tunnels. The very same thing I saw during the last trip I came into contact with them. The trip 2 weeks prior prepared me to stop asking questions, let go, and travel as deep as I could. I'll clip in this moment of the audio recording now. What you are about to hear at first is the cracking of the bones in my body, then my reaction to this labyrinth of tunnels. I will describe the experience after. The bones cracking was the result of what felt like the mushroom literally taking over my body and doing a chiropractic adjustment on me. My body just moved. I popped every finger, then my neck and elbows and even my hips somehow. During this moment, it felt as if my brain was a mechanical object, and the only way to describe these sensations is like this. The psilocybin felt like a key falling into place in my head. It felt like things were literally and mechanically locking into place in my brain. This feeling was paired with the vision of literal gears and mechanisms, huge, colorful, deeply symmetrical gears and machine-like things lining up with each other and clicking into a completed puzzle. Right after this, I yawned, and the yawn spiked the oxygen in my brain. I felt pulled out of myself, and this thing began. The things I was shown and places I slipped into looked like the actualization of everything, including things that don't exist. Places where the potential of all intelligence and all life has come to fruition, where totality has been realized. It felt ancient while simultaneously billions of years into the future. It felt timeless and ever-present. Objects were without scale, no way to tell if I was looking at things millions of miles wide or the size of atoms. It looked endless, part organic, part mechanical emotions and ineffable things growing towards me and around me. I sunk into a place where infinity was tangible. Endlessness was within reach. Absolute and vast landscapes full of stars and inhabited with intelligence. I remember in particular the vision of walking down this dimly lit glowing path, and on either side of me stretched these red pyramids overflowing with what looked like ancient script in an alien language full of symbols. There's no way to describe it. The entirety of all things, the culmination of all life, an ancient being who is not only all-knowing but is all-performing and all-showing. A deep beauty that exists throughout the universe and inside myself, impossible to grasp and inspiring to behold. As I sunk into the impossibly ineffable details of this reality, I found myself surrounded by the highly complex and connected walls of the corridor I traveled through on my first mushroom trip. I was in this place that is the precursor to the Elf's nest, the lobby of the other side. I was in the maze you must find your way through to exit this realm entirely. It was immensely familiar, and I will do my best to describe what I saw. As I traveled deeper through these tunnels, it felt as if my awareness was completely disconnected from my body. I was no longer my body, and was for the most part bodiless, formless awareness floating down the psychedelic river. I was surrounded by highly complex mathematical geometric patterns of every color, pulsing and glowing with neon waves of immense feeling that simply can't be experienced here. Like I was in a bloodstream, I was floating forward, surrounded by little blue bacteria-looking organisms, and stars sparkled around me. Everything was alive and breathing, yet machine-like and mechanical. The walls looked like the most refined architecture from another planet of beings advanced by billions of years, with shapes that are simply impossible in this world. Multi-dimensional, highly detailed things perpetually flowering and folding into themselves. Bear in mind that whatever you're imagining right now is 1/1,000,000th as detailed and vivid and intense as what you see while you're actually there. Even recalling it, I can reach only a small percentage of everything that happened because it is simply an overload of information for the human mind. As I looked around, I could have easily gotten lost anywhere I looked, at anything I saw. The density of beauty and love and details and action was overwhelming, and I was walking a thin line between keeping myself intact and completely getting lost in myself. But I knew I just had to go. I rarely get this chance, and I knew with certainty that something intense had happened to me. I thought I was either dead or my brain was broken. I had no idea what was real or where my body was or even who I was, but I didn't care because I just had to keep going. This doesn't happen very often, so I knew I didn't really have much choice. This continued, and again for the second time in this life, I was in front of the spinning, immensely symmetrical, geometric, breathing, blindingly beautiful vortex. In the middle of a space that shouldn't exist, I was face to face with the chrysanthemum. And in the very center of the unbearably beautiful mandala, was what can only be described as the simultaneously brightest and darkest thing there is. It obviously can't be translated into ape talk, but it appeared to be an object or place in reality with all aspects. It was a roaring beacon made of everything that exists and everything that doesn't. It's the source of life and of consciousness. It's the blinding white light at the end of the tunnel. It's the thing that sings the song of the universe. This is where all of our experience emanates from. And so the obvious thing for me in that moment was to jump right into it. And in what felt like a piercing of a bubble or a membrane and a leaving behind of my worldly self, I entered the realm of these godlike, hyper-intelligent beings. I can never recall how many there are because there is so much happening at once, but I would guess this time around 3 or 4 maybe. They seemed to be waiting, almost sitting amongst this huge machine-like thing with infinite tangling tubes and complex blinking mechanisms, pulsing layers and glistening parts existing in multiple places, folding into themselves, all putting on this perfectly orchestrated and highly artistic show. The entities were separate from this great big, perfectly symmetrical, interdimensional spaceship, but appeared to be made of the same highly complex and deeply intricate interlocking hyperspace stuff. Last time I was in this place, they came bounding up to me and danced and flew around me in a beautifully orchestrated display. This time, however, as I popped into this elf nest, the feeling I got was that they were waiting for me, and had been for a while. It felt like they were almost disappointed that I had been so long. It was an "about time, let's get to work" sort of feeling. I was floored. I would even say I was appalled. I couldn't begin to believe what I was experiencing. And I had no time at all to gain my bearings because again, for the second time in my life, these things came right up to me and began presenting me with highly intricate, emotion-filled, painfully beautiful, living alien objects. Extremely worked and meticulously crafted pieces of hyperdimensional artwork. Horrifyingly beautiful, otherworldly toys, profound in the deepest sense. As this all was happening, I couldn't believe it, and I just kept asking myself what the fuck is going on, with the last ounce of rational thought I had left. What the fuck? No way this is happening. Fuck no. This is crazy. No way. Is this really happening? And as I asked these things to myself, the beings seemed to be tired of and frustrated with all of the trivial questions I was asking. They communicated through emotions and through visions and directly in front of me and into my mind. And this time I could almost hear them. Obviously my ears weren't receiving vibrations through the air, instead these concepts and things were manifesting in front of me. And I knew it was the machine elves making these things happen. They were creating perfection. And all I knew is that this is where all life begins, and where all life ends. This was the realm of the ancestors. This place was what's responsible for all inspiration. This was the experience of something completely other, unseen here. Some of us can hear its silent call and see its distant light, and attempt endlessly to reach this state through meditation and yoga and discipline and art and chemical intervention, like moths attract to a light. This is the source of reality, because it felt millions of times more intense and real than life as an ape here on Earth. The beings infinitely more wise than I, their language so alien, the most alien thing I have experienced in my life. I kept trying to snap myself out of it, but they insisted that I stay, and I was pretty much stuck in there with 4 dried grams worth of psilocybin coursing through my brain. I had absolutely no recollection of my physical self. The moment was too overloaded with information for my mind to grasp anything, let alone the concept of past or future. I was just there. They were telling me, focus, focus, stop asking questions, stop, look for God's sake, look monkey, look, make this. And they just did the thing they do. Not only should they themselves not have been possible to behold, but they showed me things that simply don't exist. Impossible objects. After a split second of presentation, every object they were presenting to me would completely fold into itself in a flowering display, and another mechanical opalescent alien toy machine would take its place. This time I watched and listened with as much focus as I could. These things they were showing me were immeasurably important. They said, "Make these, here's how you do it." And an impossible living machine thing would happen. They'd say, "This one's called Arambla Septien." Then, almost like they were pushing each other around, another one would come up and show me something completely different. "This is Grendisklattebopt Sketter." Obviously this isn't what they said, but it was things like this. They knew that I draw and write and make music and paint, so they were giving me pure, unreachable inspiration. I was giving way to amazement. I was becoming very overwhelmed because of the reality of what was happening, and they said, "Isn't this what you want? This is exactly what you came here for, right?" Object after object. One piece of spiritual hyper-technology after another. Alien graphs impossibly dense with information. With my mind being completely blown, blinded by the beauty that engulfed me, I tried extremely hard to focus on everything that was happening. And the more I focused, the more they would show me. They were trying to cram in as much information as they could. After these magical objects, they showed me around this huge, living, futuristic, machine-like vessel we were all in. I was so confused and exhausted as my mind had been frying for hours, and this was the crescendo. They noticed this, and after finishing up the tour of the museum at the center of existence, they kicked me out and said, "Do it, monkey. Keep doing it. Do it. We love you. We love you. You're just like us. We love you." Then slowly and comfortably, my awareness slipped back into this meat suit of a body as I traveled backward through these tunnels and doorways. And before I knew it, I was back in my room. I shot my eyelids open faster than I ever have. This is probably hour 3 or 4. The open-eye visuals were still roaring and swimming and flashing around me, but I was back from wherever I just was. Then, similarly to the way it felt like something took over my body to crack all my bones, a thought placed itself into my head. Grab the crystal. And my gaze fell onto a large quartz crystal that I've had on a shelf in my room collecting dust for years. I proceeded to grab the crystal and pushed it against my skin, starting at the top of my head and working my way down to my crotch in intervals of pushing it against my body. In that moment, I had an absolute, unquestionable conviction that this was the right thing to do. This was the first time I had used a crystal in this way, and I physically felt a tingling sensation on every part of my body I placed the crystal on. This sensation was very warm, almost like a vibratory tingle, cleansing the energy in my body. And I only felt this when I placed the crystal on my body, pointing away from me, in the same direction as if it were growing out of my skin. I was pushing this crystal onto my body and moving around doing some sort of intuitive mushroom trance yoga in a slow dance for maybe an hour. I'm naturally an extremely skeptical person, and so have never cared to look into crystals for spirituality. I knew hippies used them for some sort of ethereal baloney, but always immediately dismissed it all as placebo. But after being completely blown out of my reality and now having these physical sensations with the crystal, I really wanted some sort of confirmation that anything that was happening was real. At this point, I was beginning to come down and could operate my phone, so I googled, "How do crystals work?" Expecting something like a forum telling me to place them in a circle and cast spells or sacrifice a virgin or something. Instead, I found a website with reports of real studies done on the effects of crystals during meditation. Those who had prior experience meditating with crystals reported feeling tingling sensations when placed near the chakras. After looking at a map of the 7 chakras, I realized these areas were exactly where I intuited the crystal should touch. This blew my mind yet again, but at this point everything was just crazy, so I couldn't question any of it. This is for the most part the last significant thing that came from this trip. I ended up falling asleep around 3 or 4 in the morning. The next day I woke up and felt completely normal, as if nothing had happened the night before. But as the days to come progressed, I found myself recalling things that happened, and after piecing it all together as best as I could, I am in complete disbelief of my own judgment and my own subjective experience. I don't know what to make of this. However, having experimented with psilocybin intoxication many times, I can assimilate some sort of picture as to what the theme of this experience is. The mushroom is not a drug that you do that makes you feel high. The mushroom is something that happens to you. It is a conversation with being who has reached something like ultimate understanding. A night with the mushroom is not like a night with painkillers or with weed or even LSD. It's more like spending a night with an intergalactic, all-knowing being. It knows the meaning of life and will share it. It will tell you that the meaning is art, novelty, beauty, and the unfolding manifestation of these values is the very process that we call life. This is the full extent of what life is, and the mushroom will give you every example and reason to believe it. At the core of this experience is the most tangible manifestation of this perfect beauty. The mushroom experience is a beacon directing life and humanity towards advancement. Now, I've received a lot of questions throughout the life of this channel, particularly on my other mushroom experience report, the most common of which are the questions, how do you know your mind isn't making these things up? And, are the entities real? I don't have an answer to this question, and I'm not sure anyone definitively does. I don't know if I want the answer, but I will say this. The experience is undeniable. The feeling of an other is absolutely convincing and infinitely inspiring, and the things I am shown while in this state are simply just things that I cannot think up normally. I am willing to entertain the idea that somewhere deep in my subconscious mind exists this great power. I am also willing to entertain the idea that the network of connection that is the entire universe has a mind, and this mind can be experienced and even communicated with. Either way, whatever happens, the experience is the same. My perspective on life forever changed. My capacity for love, creativity, and inspiration catalyzed to a degree previously unimaginable. And here's ultimately what I came out with after these two experiences. We humans watch movies. We listen to music, we read books, we play games, we worry, and we project delusion into our reality. We think and get stuck in our minds. We do all these things and get lost in these acts with the unspoken intention to evoke from within us some sort of a cheap feeling of wonder. The peculiar thing, however, is that in the consumption of manufactured and elusive wonder, our heads are down, drawn to the product in question, our eyes too low to see the great potential of what can be found here in this present moment of reality. To create wonder from within what there is to liberate oneself from consumption, and in turn from themselves entirely. As soon as one realizes that creation is an act and not an occurrence, he can completely embody the act. No effort is required to slip into the act while simultaneously aware of the facade. We all are actors in the show of creation. Some of us just forgot. Keep going, fellow apes. Love to all.